on the topics Belgium, Brazil, Congo, UK and all over the USA to crowds from 14 to 40,000. International leadership speaker, trainer and coach. Author of Learn to Raw Leadership, Attitude Hack, Live a More Excellent Life, 5 Battle Strategies of a Victorious Warrior. 2021 President's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Founding partner of the John Maxwell team. Toastmaster International Speech Competition semi-finalist. Founder of Tell It Like It Is TV, ThatGuyRocks.com and ThatGuySpeaks.com. Creator of Story Power TV, Transforming Grace TV, and Leading Leaders Podcast. Producer of 4 TV programs and podcasts for Liftable TV and World Trumpet Television as well as multiple social media channels. Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
You know, it's one thing to say that someone advanced because they cheated on the test. It's another thing to say that they had a little help doing the work. But I want you to understand that leaders who don't do their own work, leaders who don't do their own push-ups, their own homework, their own research, their own developmental work internally, the who that they are, those people are not just not good leaders. They're misleaders, and I believe they're a danger to others. I'm going to tell you why today on Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and there were several illustrations of people in leadership who, well, they haven't done their own homework. They haven't done the work at all. They've counted on others to do the work for them. You see them on a regular basis in the news media or testifying in front of Congress or when they're being called to the carpet by the board, and their answers sound something like, I don't recall, I just don't know, I'll have to dig into that, let me get back to you on that, let me circle back on that. Here's what they're telling you. I don't have a clue what's going on under my responsibilities. I don't have a clue what those people who work for me are actually doing in their job. I haven't been paying attention, or I've got more important things to do. We heard that one recently from a leader who I believe should have a greater level of responsibility in all of the things that are going on, but the answer was straight out of the leader's mouth, I have more important things to do. Now, how would you like to think that as you're sitting in a jetliner, row 16, right next to the window, the pilot never actually finished all the training? They kind of cheated. They let somebody else take the test. Maybe they had a pinch hitter, if you will, who went in and took care of the exams, and they really didn't study for the test, and they didn't really, get in the flight simulator, and they've never actually taken off or landed in anything besides an Uber. But because they were awarded the certificate as a pilot, they're now at the front of the plane, and your life is in their hands. Now, I know that sounds like a ridiculous exaggeration, but Catch Me If You Can was a great example of a guy who pretended to be a pilot and never actually flew a plane. There are a whole lot of people who have never really done the work, but they've been elevated to the position. A while back, I was in Brazil, and I took this concept as a bit of a social experiment while teaching leadership to business leaders in Brazil. My interpreter and I walked to the front of the room. He was a younger guy than me, probably half my age, quite a bit taller, very physically fit. He was quite the specimen. Here I am, an old frumpy dude, and so we stood back to back, and I made the point that in leadership, you've got to do your own push-ups. And so we got down on the floor to do push-ups. And I said, I will count, and as I count, we will do the push-ups. And he's interpreting everything that I'm saying into Portuguese. And so we get down on the floor, foot to foot, so our heads are facing the opposite direction, and we begin to do push-ups. And I'm calling them out. 1, 2, 3. And every time I call one out, he repeats it, and we both do a push-up. And after about 5, I lean on my elbow like I'm just sunbathing or waiting for the next train, And as I'm leaning on my elbow, I'm still counting and he's still doing push-ups. And the crowd began to get very frustrated because they could see that I was calling out the push-ups, but he was doing the work. And they began to get out of their chairs and kind of look around like, hey. And then I could hear them saying in Portuguese to him, and he was doing all he could not to laugh because this was a planned routine. But eventually we kind of gave up the gig and we both stood up and laughed about it and everybody applauded. And I said, the challenge is we have so many people who want to be in charge of something, but they don't want to do the work necessary to be in charge of something. The real challenge with that is that level of accountability and responsibility that goes along with being in charge of something. Accountability and responsibility. That's what push-ups are about. Obviously they're good for your body and good for your joints and good for your heart and good for your circulation, and any kind of exercise is good for your brain. Don't let that one slip by you. But the real point of this story here is that those things that need to be done by the leader cannot be abdicated. They can't be delegated just because there's somebody else who's willing to do it and capable of doing it. My young interpreter was much more physically fit than myself and a perfect specimen to be doing push-ups in the front of the room. But it wasn't going to do me any good at all. No good at all. There are a lot of leaders who want to abdicate the tough stuff. They want to hand off the management of dealing with somebody who needs to be terminated. They want to hand off that problem child of a project, a customer, a client. They don't want to deal with those tough things at all. They want somebody else to deal with those things. And the result is either the things don't get dealt with at all, or they do get dealt with, but the leader has no insight into how or why, which means they're going to have a really hard time dealing with the same problem next time. I know some people who are taking college courses and they kind of cut corners on their college courses. They get some help. And I don't just mean like getting a tutor. I mean getting some help with the class. They want somebody else to show up in class for them. That sounds ridiculous, but it's a thing. I was listening to a guy yesterday who was saying that during his college degree, there was actually a class that he signed up for. And he took this class. It was a 2-hour class every day on campus. And in this particular classroom, they had removed all of the desks, all of the podiums, all of the lecterns, even the teacher's desk, and filled the room, which had been painted black, and all the windows blacked out. They filled the room with beanbag chairs, cots, and sofas. The class was a 2-hour class on napping, the power of napping. Yes, he was paying to go to school. Whether he was paying for that or his parents or a scholarship or a grant, I don't know. But he was paying to go to college to get a degree, and part of his degree program included 2.5 hours of napping every day. Now just back for a second and ask yourself, if that were your brain surgeon, your heart surgeon, the person performing a kidney transplant on your parent or your loved one, how would you feel about knowing that a large portion of his academic training was taking a nap? In my opinion, that's not a good thing. But there are a lot of leaders who operate in that way of saying, if I can just fill the block of time with what looks like work, if I can just get the diploma, there doesn't have to be any substance up under that diploma. I've mentioned here before, people that I know from foreign countries who have bachelor's and master's degrees in things like, one of them specifically got his bachelor's degree in computer science, and his final exam in one of those classes was to create a Word document. I'm not thinking that's going to be really solid if you hire this individual because they have a bachelor's degree and what you expect them to do is your security, the cryptology behind your internal security for all of your online services. If your apps and your security for your secure socket interchange of finances, your buying and selling of goods on your website is managed by a guy who got his bachelor's degree because he could create a Word document, you may find yourself in a world of hurt. But see, there are a lot of leaders who want to do the same kind of shortcut. They don't want to learn all the problems that go with humanity. They don't want to deal with the personality issues and the personality conflicts and the learning styles and the communication gaps. They don't want to deal with any of that. They only want to focus on the net result. They have a myopic focus on one thing. Maybe it's the bottom line. Maybe it's the next title. Maybe it's landing that big deal. I remember working in a place of business one time, and when I was hired in, it was the standard practice for the manager and the assistant manager to take the high-end clients out for lunch every Friday. I guess that's a good thing. I mean, some might call that a boondoggle. Some might ask, is the work in the store actually getting done while the manager and the assistant manager are off spending an hour or two at lunch with the biggest clients? That by itself was enough of a rub for me. But what was really a rub for me, and the one thing that I refused to carry on, was the fact that they always went for a steak lunch at a topless bar. The manager and the assistant manager would take the high-end clients to lunch at a topless bar. Well, the steaks are cheap, but I'm not sure they're all there about business or they're all there about steaks. And I can imagine there were some adult beverages that were shared in that, which then makes me wonder, does that mean Friday is just a day off? Because you're not going to get much work done after you've spent that much time in that kind of environment with a little imbibing. So the rest of the day is pretty much shot. And depending on what time you left for lunch, maybe you came in for 3 hours worth of work and you're not doing any push-ups at all. You're expecting the people in the store to do it. So when I took over that store, one of the first things I did was said, we're not doing that anymore. And if we lose those customers, I'll replace them with better customers. But no, we're not going to behave like that here. It caused a lot of friction because there were a whole lot of people who had already become accustomed to that process. You got to do your own push-ups as a manager, as a leader. You've got to be willing to step up and go, yeah, I will do the hard work. I will stay later. I will find the new customers. I will repave the road if that's what it takes, but we're not going down that road anymore. And you can't delegate that kind of decision. You got to walk it out. You can't just dictate that kind of decision and expect everybody to follow along with it unless you're willing to walk it out. You've got to do your own push-ups. Now, I'm going to tell you, this transfers all the way across the board, and I don't care if you become a leader in politics, a leader in corporate America, if you become a surgeon or a nurse or an Uber driver or an airline pilot or a military commander or a soldier on the battlefield. If you're not willing to do your own push-ups, if you're not willing to do the hard work that makes you who you are, that leads you to the accomplishments and the success that you intend to see, then along the way, what's going to happen is other people are going to step up and start doing the work that you won't do, and they will also earn the titles that you're seeking. They will also win the loyalty and the influence that you think you have. If you're not willing to do the push-ups, everybody around you sees it. You're like the emperor with no clothes on. It's not just that you're not doing the work, it's that everybody knows you're not doing the work. You're not competent at the job that you may hold the title for, somebody else is doing it. And all of the people that you serve and all of the people that you lead, they are fully aware that you are not competent. It's hard to hide the fact that you're not willing to do the work. It's very hard to hide the fact. Not to mention the fact that if you do enough push-ups, eventually your physique will begin to show it. And by not doing those push-ups, your physique will definitely show it. If somebody else is doing your push-ups, their physique is going to show the effort for the work you claim to be putting in. And so it is true in your finances, so it is true in your personal relationships, in your marriage at home, in the raising of your kids, in the way that you deal with your own personal life, your own personal development, your own personal growth, your own personal leadership. If you're not doing the push-ups on those things, there will be evidence to the matter of the truth. You may say, I read X number of books, but if your opinions are not changing, if the way you do business is not changing, then you're not actually learning anything. You may be reading them, but you're not applying them. You're not doing your own push-ups. If you claim to have been in every other kind of coaching course or mentoring course, or you've had XYZ as your coach, and I know people who will brag straight up, I've been in so-and-so's coaching program for X amount of time, and I'm like, well, that's great, but I don't see you practicing anything that they talk about. It doesn't look to me like they've made any impact on your life. Why? Because you're not doing the push-ups. You're just not doing the push-ups. You're not doing the work necessary to demonstrate that what you claim has changed your life has actually changed your life. It doesn't show. Whatever that is. Maybe it's your faith. Maybe it's your business acumen. Maybe it's that last degree program that you added. But if you're not doing the push-ups of the things that you think you've learned or the things that you claim to have learned, then all the titles in the world won't matter. Like the guy who came and spoke to a group I was a part of a while back with a master's degree in communication and speech therapy from a notable university. But by the time he was done, half the audience was asleep and nobody wanted to buy his books and nobody wanted to have a conversation with him. Literally, he said, "Thank you." Nobody clapped. Most of the crowd got up and walked out of the room. He captured nobody. He connected with nobody. Did he have the degree? Yes. Does he have the credentials? Yes. Is he being paid well by somebody to do what he's doing? Yes. I fear for those in his class who are learning to mimic his style because his style is ineffective. I can't imagine being in his class and being asked to submit an exam that meets his standards. That would be hard. But I'm sad to say there are a lot of business leaders, a lot of business owners, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of college professors, a lot of political leaders who have the same measure of effectiveness, almost zero, in what they do. And it's evidence that they never did the push-ups themselves. When I first started studying public speaking, James Malinchak was one of the first people that I turned to because I watched a video of him online. And in this video, he said that he'd been approached by a woman who said, "I can coach you to be a better communicator." And he asked her the question, "How many times have you spoken and been paid for it this year?" And she said, "Oh, that's not what I do. I'm just a coach." He said, "So you're a speaking coach who doesn't speak?" She said, "Right." He said, "Okay, well, if you're not going to help me grow my speaking business, what are you going to help me do?" She said, "Well, I'm going to help you speak better to the audiences you speak to." He said, "Okay, what audiences do you speak to or who have you helped before for evidence of that?" She said, "Oh, well, you'd be my first client." Well, she's already got the shingle out there. She's already got the website out there. She's already taken money from people, supposedly, but she's never had a real client. She's never had anybody who can be evidence to the fact that she succeeded. And James said, "At that moment, I realized there are a lot of people who are running a sham. They've never spoken, they've never collected a fee, they've never been in front of an audience, but they want to tell you how to do it better." That's a pretty amazing audacity on their behalf to be able to make that claim, or even to say, "This is what I do." That's a challenge, but it happens in every industry. It happens in every industry. So my challenge to you as leaders is really simple. Take the time as a leader to do the push-ups. If there's a field of knowledge you need to grow in, grab the books and actually read the books. Don't just talk about having read the books. Don't just quote the authors. Don't just throw out the idioms and the axioms and the cool quotes and phrases from the stage and try to impress people with your style of delivery that looks just like somebody else's. If you're a business leader, don't just claim to be a student of Grant Cardone or Gary Vee or somebody else. Actually put into practice the kinds of things that they teach. If you don't like the way Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman manage money, then follow the ways of Robert Kiyosaki, but apply them. Don't just quote them. Don't just talk about them. Do the push-ups. If you're a person of faith, don't just quote a few scripture verses. Ask yourself, how have those applied to my life, and what difference have they made in the relationships that I have with myself, with my friends, with my God? Don't just claim the credentials. Earn them. Don't just claim the success. Walk it out. And if you know that radical transformation is going to be necessary in your life, in your organization, in your community, in your country, get busy about the business of making that radical change in you. There's an old phrase from way back when. I honestly can't tell you who originally said it. It's been attributed to a lot of people. But the phrase is this: be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see in the world. What does that mean? Do your own push-ups. It starts with you. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.